Just a minute here,
Okay.
we can get started. All right, Chair, we are ready to begin the meeting.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please? The meeting's called to order, and may we have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost.
Here.
Commissioner Tom Wood.
Here.
Commissioner Wendy Newland.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Lewis. Commissioner Michael Lowry.
Here. Thank you. Under amendments to the agenda, we're going to flip 7A and 7B. So Timnath South Minor Subdivision now becomes 7A. Any other amendments to the agenda, commissioners, staff? Buddy? No. Okay. Very good. The determination of alternate voting, Michael, you will vote this evening. Public comment, this is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody signed up or otherwise? Hearing none, okay, we close the general public comment. Consent agenda consists only of approval of the May 7th, 2024 meeting minutes. Commissioners, any additions or corrections to the minutes? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved on a 5-0 vote. Business items, both are open for public hearings. So we first move on to what is now item 7A, Timnath South Minor Subdivision. Logan.
Yes, one moment. Let me share my screen. Okay. So this item is Timnath South Minor Subdivision. The owner is Timnath Ranch Investments LLC, and the applicant is TB Group. This is a minor subdivision, which is a process that allows for the subdivision of land where there is no public right-of-way dedication, and the resulting subdivision consists of 6 or fewer lots. The minor subdivision is being processed somewhat in concert with Timnath South third filing preliminary plat, and this minor subdivision is considered to be a cleanup item. The minor subdivision consists of an approximately 110-acre area split between 4 parcels and is outlined in blue. The area is bounded by East County Road 36 to the north, East County Road 32 to the south, South County Road 5 to the west, and County Road 13 to the east. The subject property makes up the most southern extent of the town's jurisdictional boundary and the town's growth management area boundary. The subject property includes areas zoned R2, single-family residential, and RE, estate residential. And this coincides with the comprehensive plan designations of rural residential and low-density residential. The minor subdivision would subdivide the existing 4 parcels into 5 parcels. Key to this proposal is to create an approximately 70-acre tract A, south of Greeley Ditch number 2, so that the owner can disconnect that parcel from the town and put it back into the jurisdiction of Larimer County. This tract was never intended to be a part of Timnath South subdivision. So as you can see on the approved sketch plan, all the lots and developable area falls north of that ditch. The remaining parcels, B through E, located north of the ditch, make up the remaining 40 acres and are included in the Timnath South third preliminary plat. And upon approval of that plat, the lot lines identified in the preliminary and final plat will supersede this plat north of the ditch. So essentially, those 4 parcels that you see, B, C, D, and E, will go away and be replaced by single-family residential lots. A few other noteworthy items, the area south of the ditch is pretty difficult for the town to serve due to limited access to the property. And if it were to be developed, sewer would need to be extended south of the Greeley ditch. Staff has reviewed the minor subdivision against the minor subdivision review criteria found in 2, 9, 10, 11 of the land use code and is recommending approval of the application. And with that, I'll let Kristen Turner present.
There we go.
Now you're on.
All right. Well, hello. It's good to see you all. I'm going to be super brief tonight and then available to answer some questions, but it's a pretty straightforward application that we're bringing forward. So what you see here is the approved sketch plan. That's the colorful lotted plan. And then we just put the portion of the minor sub that overlaps that on top of this, so it was easy to see what's what. So the blue area is what's north of the ditch and is part of the Timnath South residential design for sketch plat and moving forward with preliminary and final plats. And we're not proposing any change to that blue area. That will continue to stay Town of Timnath. That will continue to stay part of the Timnath South subdivision. So really the only thing we're doing is creating a single line on a plat that divides that blue area from the green area. And the green area is tract A. That is the area that we're separating. As you guys all know, with any property, it's when you purchase a property, it's whatever shape it's in when you purchase it, right? So this original piece of farm, when the DeTulios purchased it, just happened to overlap part of the Timnath South neighborhood area and part of the land area south of the ditch. And so we're just looking to separate that portion that's south of the ditch. Okay, so here is our technical map. Again, I'm just showing you the same boundaries. Blue is still part of the Timnath South subdivision, no changes. Green is what we're proposing to just separate into its own tract. The lotting that you see on that plan is the existing lotting that was done many years ago. As part of the technical criteria for putting together this plat, we're required to show the existing conditions. That's why you don't see the lotting that's proposed as part of that amended sketch plat. It's why they don't look the same. But we are in the middle of a preliminary plat process as well. It's gone through several rounds of review, and we actually paused it to do this minor sub. As Logan mentioned, it's a cleanup item. It'll separate tract A, so that'll no longer be included in our legal description for the Timnath South subdivision. And so it'll change our legal description. That's essentially the change it'll be to the Timnath South plat. So if this is approved, once it is approved, then we'll proceed with the preliminary plat so that we can update the legal description to be correct at that time. Okay. So I just included a couple of the reasons, and Logan has gone over several of these. So again, to just be quick about them. The intent for the property south of the ditch was never for it to be developed. It was always for it to remain in the county. There has never been a proposal for the Timnath South subdivision that has included the property south of the ditch. The DeTulios also own adjacent property to that tract A south of the ditch. It's currently in the county. They intend for it to remain in the county. So their intent is that everything south of the ditch will just be a county property and will remain there. As Logan mentioned, services and connections to this area are really challenging. It's why it has never been considered for any type of development to be part of the Timnath South community. There won't be a road access. It's hard to get services there. Emergency access is really challenging. So it's just always made sense to keep it separated and have that ditch be the boundary for the Timnath South subdivision. There is an existing mining permit on the property south of the ditch right now. It's been in place for many, many years. There's no current mining that's happening there. If at any point in the future they decided they wanted to do some mining in the ponds that are down there, then they would pursue a permit through the county and the state. And that is not permitted when you have a portion of the property that would be in the town of Timnath and a portion of the property that would be in the county. So it's also a cleanup item on that front to make sure that we have the appropriate designations to move forward with that. If that's something they choose to pursue, there are no plans for that at this point. But just for clarity's sake, I wanted to make sure you understood that point. And if they did move forward with any kind of mining permit south of the ditch, it would require new updated permits. It would require notifications, all of the requirements that come through the county and state process. Those would be employed, neighbors would be notified. And so it would be a process just like we go through an entitlement process in the town of Timnath. All right, so that takes us back to our technical map. And I have nothing else to add at this point, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I'm sure, stay up there, Kristen.
Sure.
Logan or any of the staff, could you educate us? This is, by my recollection, the first de-annexation we've had. There may have been others, but I don't recall it. Just talk very briefly in general about the process, what's involved, and then tie it into the specifics of this, which I think we understand, but explain that in general, because you'll be educating all five of us who've never been through a de-annexation before, please.
Certainly. I think Carolyn is equipped to answer that.
So I want to clarify that this is not an application for de-annexation. Anything you have seen in the record that implies this is asking for de-annexation is not what is before you. The applicants are saying they are asking for a minor subdivision in hopes that they can later petition for de-annexation, which requires a 100% petition, a petition signed by 100% of the property owners. You're not being asked to decide on that, and that has absolutely nothing to do with what you are deciding today. But happy to talk you through that since it has been raised and the applicants have said that that is their future intent, but that is not what is before you today. So should they petition for disconnection, the first step is that they have to have a petition signed by 100% of the property owners and set forth the legal description of the property along with a title commitment. We then give notice to any metropolitan districts or counties. I would hope that they would have not be included in any metropolitan districts at the time that they would petition for de-annexation because we can only have property within the metropolitan districts that are within the town of Timnath. So the town council may also need to see an amendment to the service plan of the metropolitan districts. We have not analyzed that yet because we have not received a petition for de-annexation, also called disconnection. And so then we give notice to the counties and the special districts who have the opportunity to object within 30 days. And if they do, we sit down and meet with them. If there's no objection, then it is set for a hearing before the town council, and there will be a disconnection ordinance. There will be two readings, first reading, hearing on second reading, as with any annexation, with any ordinance. So it would not come back before this planning commission on the disconnection issue. At that point, if the town council approves disconnection, the property is no longer within the town of Timnath. It is within the unincorporated portion of Weld County. And at that point, the property would continue to pay taxes on any bond obligations, but not any, general obligation taxes to the town. And that at that point, the county is the one that makes any determinations as to future land use, as to mining permits, as to anything else they want to apply for, and any vested property rights would be expired at the time that they are disconnected. So they'd have to start over with any land use planning processes in the county.
Thank you. Did I misspeak on de-annexation? I thought I saw somewhere in the packet that this was
It was a little bit confusing, but this is not an application for de-annexation. This is just an application for a minor subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah.
We included the why for the request for the minor sub, but this is just a request for the minor subdivision, which is essentially that single line that creates tract A. That's it.
I'd also like to clarify two things about that. First of all, I also want to clarify it's not a rezoning because there's also a statement in the staff report that says existing zoning is RE estate, residential estate, and single family residential. Proposed zoning is estate residential. The zoning does not change. This is just a petition for a minor subdivision. And the second clarification is we're not just creating tract A, it's actually a request to create 5 tracts instead of 4. So you are creating new legal descriptions for tracts A, B, C, D, and E as well, just above where tract A is being carved out.
Very good. Well, we certainly, commissioners, have to look forward to in some time in the future, a real de-annexation, and we'll, it doesn't come here even. Oh, well, we don't have that to look forward to. That's the second time I've been corrected today, and I haven't even talked to my wife yet, so. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. All right, good. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Commissioners, then, questions, and then we'll circle back to me if none of you ask, what are my further questions? Wendy, nothing. Tom?
I have a question, maybe a simple question. Where is the boundary line? Is it in the middle of the ditch, on the north side of the ditch, or on the south side of the ditch?
To create the tract A parcel is on the north side of the ditch.
So the tract A parcel includes the ditch.
Correct.
And the blue area north of the ditch, is that in a specific metro district, the south or the southwest district?
Is it in a metro district right now?
Dino, or Mr. DiTullio, why don't you come up?
Hi, Dino DiTullio. I don't think that's included in a metro district right now. It was shown as additional property to be added administratively to Southwest Timnath metro districts when that service plan was approved, probably in, I don't know, 2015 or 16. But I'm glad you mentioned that today because I took a mental note that we need to complete the de-annexation prior to including that in the metro district. So glad you said that.
But eventually it'll be part of the southwest metro district.
Correct.
So that'd be part of Summerfield Estates.
Just the part north of the ditch in the town, as you also mentioned, because I think one of the criteria for inclusion in a metro district is also be included in the town limits.
Great, thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
That's all the questions I had.
Thanks. Who else? Michael, Marty.
You had said that there's no plans to use the mining permit, but any plans at all for that or just?
You know, there has been talk, there is some gravel down there and in that sort of, if you bring that map back with the green and blue, in the upper right section of the green, there is about 1 million tons, kind of, I guess, the lower right section in there where it's a little bit bigger. There is some gravel there, and we've talked about digging a little pond there and conveying the bulk of it across the ditch when we build the rest of that neighborhood out, and that would save, I can't remember the number, it was several thousand truck trips through the town. And so we have looked at that, and it would potentially be feasible. Of course, we'd have to come in and go through the process to expand that existing mining permit. And we've looked at it preliminarily, and I would suspect if nothing changes, we would like to do that, and we'd be back in a year or two asking for that. But we haven't gone very far with it.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
No.
I think I know the answer to this in context, but and I don't recall when you first came before us with this development proposal. Was this at all mentioned? Were you aware that this would eventually happen? And I guess maybe a question for staff. Is it normal to put this particular cart after the horse, if you will?
No, it's, could I get, I don't know, you've been around for a long time.
Thank you for
don't remind
yes,
you, right?
I'm painfully aware of that.
I've been around a long time too, but This parcel was actually improperly annexed without signatures, without an annexation agreement. The infamous Becky Davidson took that down and annexed that when it was not intended to be annexed. And and believe it or not, once it gets onto the town's tax rolls, and nobody knew, there were no signatures, and there were she annexed maps without an annexation agreement and without signatures on an annexation map. But by the time that rolls through the system, once it's on tax rolls, it's annexed. I mean, that's the eyes of the law. And so we didn't even know about it for quite some time. I didn't even own the property at that time. We were working with the Graves family. And they called up one day and said, "Hey, why am I paying Timnath taxes?" And I'm like, "You're not." "Yes, I am." And they showed it to me. I said, "I don't know." So we investigated, and that's what happened. And so by the time we figured it out, it was going to be quite a process, and we were going to have to go through de-annexation anyway. And so, and that was, I think we just sort of said, let's just kind of see what happens. We didn't own the property then. The Graves family thought, well, I guess I'm annexed, and then we ended up reviving our contract with them, got it purchased, and kind of started working on the maps again. And that's kind of led us to today. So we probably always would have requested, it makes sense. It's a natural dividing line between the town and the county, I think, to be the ditch. But we didn't intend to annex it and then come back and de-annex it. What we probably would have done is just show it on the plat, create the tracks, and then ask to annex you have to annex the whole parcel. So at some point we probably would have, how would we have done that? Would we have annexed the entire, subdivided through the county probably, and then asked to annex a portion of the land? So yeah, that's probably what we would have done. But that's the history of why kind of we're doing this, because you're right, it's a little bit backwards.
Thank you. Just to make a point, I've been around for a long time, not quite as long, going back to that particular individual whom you referenced. And by the way, not quite that long, but I am familiar with that history.
Time flies. I think that's been 12 or 13 years ago now. Maybe no, 15 years ago. So yeah, right.
Very good. Thank you. Dino, other questions? I see microphones on here. Any? No? Okay. All right, staff, anything else? Carolyn, anything else to add? Okay, very good.
Except that it is a public hearing, so you
Yes.
do want to call for comments.
Yes, I was about to do that. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here who has signed up or otherwise wishes to speak on this particular item? Very good. We will close that public hearing. Commissioners, anything else before I ask for a motion? Very good. With that, do I have a motion on Timnath South minor subdivision, please?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion, it's moved and seconded to approve the Timnath South minor subdivision. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Move on to what is now item 7B, the Land Use Code Amendment number 16. Logan.
All right. Okay, so the following land use code amendments were items that were continued by council during the previous work sessions and council meeting and have been repackaged as land use code amendments 16. The first items relate to our circulation general requirements, which says that all streets must be designed to Loveland's version of the Lucas standards by way of reference. This code amendment makes a clear connection to those requirements by explicitly calling out the Loveland version in 662 and reduces some ambiguity of the code language. So here you can see the existing language And then in red line, as is included in your packets, the proposed language. The next series of amendments relate to our annexation procedures. So sections 10 to 9, 10.
Hold on a second.
Oh,
Do we want to,
do you want to discuss each item
Yes, I would like to discuss it.
individually?
Yeah, individually. Thank you. We would, thank you, Marty. We would, I believe that's safe to say, we would like to discuss them individually. So let's back up. We could, please. Okay, so the acronym you used, I heard it at council meeting. Could you, that's the Larimer County Urban Street Standards?
Correct.
Okay, so as you refer to that, you all up to speed on, okay. So and we're gonna have public comment on that as well, opportunity, but we'll do that all at the end. Okay, so commissioners, questions for staff on, for Logan on this item, Article 6.6.2.
I have a question, and kind of relevant to what we talked about before the meeting. Does the Loveland version of the street have a pavement profile in the requirements, specifically stating how many inches of asphalt, how many inches of compacted road base under the road? Is that something that would be in that Loveland standard, or would that be a separate geotech report on a site-specific basis?
Yeah, so the way the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards handles that is there is what's called a default section that it has to meet that minimum. That's based on worst case scenarios. But at the option of the developer, what they could do is do it like start with the default as the estimate cost. But as you go out in the fields, you do water line improvements and stuff that affects so if you get a geotechnical report early and you get all that work done to change the site conditions, so that geotechnical report may not be as valid. So what happens is right before they're ready to pave, their geotechnical engineer has to do a report that's accepted by the town, and they review it at that time, and then it's approved. So it wouldn't be necessarily on the plans, but if you look, I'd have to go back and look. I know in Loveland, we had a note that called that out. So there is a geotechnical report done, but it's done right before they do the paving of the sections.
I'd like to encourage staff to consider a standard pavement section, it may be worst case, but so many inches of compacted base on so many inches of asphalt, just so that the default is not paving over mud. Because I think as we've talked, there may be some cases like that, and I think we need to find ways to protect the city so that we don't have roads cracking seriously in the future.
Yeah, I agree totally on that. Yeah, but
Great. My only comment.
Other comments on this?
is there something to take note of there that we have to add to this, or that's just?
Well, I know that without a pavement profile that says you have to have so many inches of this and so many inches of that, the developers may maybe stretch their luck and not put down any road base.
I think what he's asking is,
Do we have to
is this
add
an action
anything?
item here at this juncture?
I think we should leave it to staff to consider that at your best judgment, but I would encourage some sort of a standard pavement profile.
yeah, definitely. Let me look into that. I'm very familiar with the Loveland in the Larimer County standards, but the design criteria technical manual that's on top of it, that's specific to Timnath.
Yep.
I'm about 95% there, but I'll definitely look into that and see if that's something if we don't have it, definitely look at adding it.
I think
And,
it might
yeah.
be good just based on
Yeah.
the soil conditions, particularly in the south part of Timnath.
Yep, okay.
Tom, because you brought it up, Marty made that comment, would it be satisfactory to you all, hence the rest of us, that note will be made to council when the land use code gets to them, that planning commission added that as a note, not necessarily a condition?
So just a point of clarification, this is just referencing the design criteria manual that was adopted in 2016. And so the amendment before you in the land use code is just a reference to the design criteria manual. If we were to amend anything, my suggestion would be we need to go back and revisit the design criteria manual where we will take note of the comment about the pavement width and other specifications. Council has some interest for staff to come back to provide some flexibility for some commercial standards in commercial areas, not necessarily residential areas. So that's the direction they gave staff. We would probably do that through the design criteria manual rather than in the land use code.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there's different codes and we want to make them integrated, right? So you've got the land use code, which is what you're talking about tonight, that references the technical standards, the Larimer County Urban Area Standards, and then the design criteria manual. So those, like Scott said, those aren't for review tonight, but definitely we could look at it and, you know, this plus maybe some other language on private drives, we could look at that and have a future possible update to that section too. Now, just wanted to confirm what Scott was saying. Yeah.
So we have two very intelligent commissioners here. I assume one or both of you will have the long memory necessary to revisit this at an appropriate time.
Right. I want to just avoid cracks in the sidewalk and streets in the future and have the town have to pay for it because it's expensive.
Very good. Other questions, comments on this particular item?
So there's probably two projects underway that have private roads. I know White Wing has private roads. I'm assuming Ladera does, but I'm not sure. I figure with all the buildings and connectors, there's some, how does this affect any ongoing projects? Would this be applied to those?
It would, yes, depending on where it is in the process. So White Wing, they haven't submitted anything that would impact that yet. They came before town council for a variance that was denied. So we have not heard from them on a formal application on that. Ladera, depending where it is in the project, we would have to consider that. So a lot of the stuff that was previously approved, the private drives, they've been accepted as they are. But as we're looking at Ladera moving forward in the future, that's something that we would need to consider and look at following the design criteria manual. And again, council made it pretty clear that they want staff to look at the standards to allow for some flexibility for those commercial areas as opposed to residential areas. So that's kind of our directive from council to bring that forward.
Okay, because in this, I don't know how significantly different this would be versus what they've already planned for.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're looking at and what we first brought before town council and plant commission was we wanted to establish a baseline standard so that we're not essentially negotiating everything from pavement width, sub-base, sidewalk width, driveway width, and those things. That's why we were referencing Lucas. But we did get a little bit of pushback from the developers, a little bit of misunderstanding of what that really meant. And the staff spent some more time investigating and really realized the design criteria manual was previously adopted and does have a lot of those specifications and standards in there. So we will be looking at that.
Okay. And as long as the council, it sounds like they're aware of this, they'll be looking at this as well. Because I just want to make sure, because if it's significantly different, it seems a bit unfair to, go change the rules, but it sounds like all that's going to be looked at, so.
Yeah, I mean, the design criteria already says that the design criteria applies to public and private streets. So one purpose is to incorporate this into the land use code so that the developers, engineers and planners are aware of that. They should already be aware of that and designing to that criteria. And, if they're not, this just makes them, puts it right into the land use code to make them even more aware of it. And then, if they need to ask for a change, they need to go to the process to ask for a waiver of a condition or a redesign under the design
Okay.
standards.
I think where it would make a big difference is on a metro district residential area where they've paved a street and then we turn it over to the city to accept it. The city wouldn't accept it until they could prove that that met all of the standards.
Yeah.
And if it's not, they'd have to go back and redo something.
Good point.
And that's really what we're trying to protect the city or the town.
So Ladera is not terribly disadvantaged in this, contrary to their assertions. They very good. That's good. To Marty's point, it did seem like we're changing horses in the middle of the stream. But we're not. Okay, other comments, questions about this item? Okay, Logan.
Okay. So the next series of amendments relate to our annexation procedures. Sections 10.2.9, 10.5.110, 10.5.4, and 10.9.3.2 provide clarity that only owners of private property petitioning for annexation to the town enter into an annexation agreement. So there's minor inclusions for that. And then we have proposed a new section 10.10 to address enclaves and state that the town has the authority to annex enclaves, which are defined as any unincorporated areas entirely contained within the boundaries of a municipality that has been surrounded for a period of not less than 3 years. Any questions on those?
Anybody? Nope. Thank you.
And then the last code amendment is Article 12, oil and gas drilling and production. And since the passing of Senate Bill 19-181, the state has granted local governments the authority to enact more restrictive regulations than those set by the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Council has directed staff to update our oil and gas regulations to be more in alignment with our neighbors. And so the proposed code amendment primarily focuses on more restrictive zoning and setback standards for new oil and gas development. The key updates are limiting oil and gas facilities as a conditional use to the agriculture and industrial zone districts. So currently they are allowed in agricultural, estate residential, business, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, regional commercial, and industrial. Requiring a 2,000-foot setback from all building units. Currently, we defer to the state setback standards for building units. Requiring a 2,000-foot setback from areas where people may congregate outdoors, such as parks, trails, and natural areas. Currently, we have a 1,000-foot setback for that.
Excuse me, back up 1 second. Is the under the middle one change it? Is the state setback standard then only 1,000 feet?
So for buildings, so there's different thresholds of what constitutes a building unit. But the absolute floor for all buildings is 200 feet for the state.
Wow.
And then it becomes more restrictive depending on the type of building unit. So residential would be 500.
Way more restrictive than.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay.
We also are including a waiver process for building units where a reduced setback is allowed if all owners and tenants within that setback area provide informed consent. We are including a residential waiver process where that 2,000-foot setback can be reduced to 1,000 feet if all owners and tenants within that 2,000-foot buffer provide informed consent. So currently for residential, we have a 500-foot setback. We also would like to require a neighborhood meeting for all oil and gas development. Currently, there's not one required. And require mailed notice to be sent to the property owners and tenants within a 2,000-foot radius of the proposed site. And currently, our notice requirement is 500 feet. And that sums up the code amendments for oil and gas.
Okay. Questions from commissioners, and we will have public comment. Let's have public comment now. Anybody signed up or otherwise? Sir, out there interested in, okay, we will close the public comment. Then, all right, commissioners, have at it.
I have a question.
Wendy.
Logan, can you bring that slide back up that you were just on? I just need some clarification for myself because the next one,
Next or the former? Next. Okay.
this one right here. So let's just say that that's an apartment complex. I just need to understand something. So everyone who lives in the apartment complex would have to agree?
Yes,
Every
If-
single person. Okay,
if they're within that.
okay.
I've got a comment. If you take an engineer scale and you scale off through Tinmouth or the Tinmouth greater growth area, having a 2,000-foot setback basically bans all oil and gas from all of Tinmouth and the future growth areas. We've gone through a lot of exercise to put all these rules in. Wouldn't it be easier to just say we're going to ban oil and gas? Or at least state the intention?
That's not legally permissible.
Okay, just
and-
maybe I'm
and
being
it-
silly.
No, I mean, so there is the Senate passed a new Senate Bill 23-181 that allows local governments to impose reasonable restrictions that are necessary to protect the public health, safety, and environment, including setbacks. But so we're specifically authorized to do setbacks. We are specific, but we are not specifically authorized to just prohibit outright. Also, there are still areas that are available for oil and gas development. So it's not quite as prohibitive as you suggest. The staff has gone through that process. I'll let Logan talk a little bit about that.
Well, and we're including the waiver process to where we can allow for those reduced setbacks.
So we require a waiver. I think there's a few places north of Harmony, between Harmony and Cobb Lake, where there's big farms and so forth, that theoretically you might be able to do it. But I also note that there are some existing oil and gas operations, particularly one due south of the property we just talked about earlier today, that is within 2,000 feet of what might be a future home just north of the Windsor Ditch. So how would you handle that? Could they build a new house that's within 2,000 feet, or would you have to get the future owner's permission?
So those are reverse setbacks. So if the gas and oil facility is in place, the setbacks are different for new development coming in to be set back from the existing
So
facility.
they'd make an exception for that existing, because there's
There-
a couple of them just across the county line in Windsor, and that one due south that's just the other side of that mining property that they showed this earlier. That certainly would be in conflict for the 2,000-foot rule.
Yeah, and they're considerably less, those setbacks.
Okay,
And those
just
are
want to
in-
make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah. So those are in section 12.7.2 on your page 25. They have the setbacks for existing wells. And so it depends on what production phase the well is in. But if the well has been there for 3 or more years, then you'll see the setback is, it's like 200 feet from a residential development.
Yeah, you'd make the 200. And I
Mhm.
think that well's been there for quite a while.
Right,
They
right.
wouldn't be able to service that well or expand that well or, put another knockout tank next to it.
So because they're in the county may have different setbacks, but they would still refer it, if it's in the GMA, they'd refer it to the town as a referral agent.
Yeah, that's correct. And our new setbacks or the proposed ones are trying to be more in alignment with the counties.
Right. I know that there is an exploration company that has looked at a property that's just west of Colorado Boulevard and proposed, I think they've even filed permits with the state, but they haven't moved forward with it in the last several years. But that would be one that would clearly be in the sights of this kind of a ruling. So it's something to be, I think, aware of.
And just for clarity, Matt just measured the distance on the wellhead that you were talking about south of the ditch. It's about 2,400 feet from the Greeley ditch, closest point.
Is it that far? My eyes are probably not as good as
Well, that's as
yours.
a bird flies, so,
Fair enough. That's only comments I had. Thank you.
Other, Michael?
Are these setbacks consistent with other towns in Larimer County?
Yeah, so when we started our research, we included in our comparison the city of Fort Collins, Larimer County, and then Loveland is currently updating their setback standards. And so we included their proposed setbacks. And this is right in line with all of those jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Marty?
I have a list. So there's one, I forgot to write down the clause that it was in, but it had a statement of where people may congregate, which I thought was overly broad because people may congregate anywhere. It was to do with some of the setbacks, and I think they meant it was meant for parks and things like that, but I just thought it was odd to say where people may congregate, because they can congregate in the middle of a street if they want. And then on page 22, 12.4.1.d.2, dealing with alternate location analysis. What would be a situation where we would want to waive an alternate location analysis?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm guessing if there's really only one proposed location that makes sense, that's sensible and meets our requirements, we would waive that study.
And I guess I should have prefaced, there's several of my questions is just, we know there's some sensitivity to this one, and that's why I made note of some of these things, that it's like, to say we may waive an alternate location, if it's blatantly obvious, then the analysis is easier, right? So I'm not sure we would waive it. It's just, it would be easier to do. Just transparency and things like that, because people seem to be against this. And then on the public notification, it's the 2,000 feet is the way it was written in there. Why not just do a general notification to the whole town?
That certainly would be, a policy decision that you all could recommend to council if you feel that the entire town and community should be notified of such a project.
Are you talking about this, excuse me, just on
Just on
oil and
this.
gas or on,
No, on oil and gas.
just on oil and gas? or-
It's just, I'm looking at it, it's, again, with sensitivities and things like that. If we're doing a notification of 2,000 feet, why not just do a general notification to the town? It's not like this is going to happen weekly, right?
Yeah, I think this is talking about the mailed notice to the property owners within 200 feet, but there would still be the regular land use notifications.
Which
Do
is
we know
only
what-
500.
But like, so would this be included in the planning news blasts and a notice of public hearing posted on the town's website? Okay, so there would still be notice to the whole community in those methodologies. It's just which properties received the individualized mailed notice.
Yeah.
And
I-
the mailed notice, the intent of that is really to notify the most impacted households.
Oh, I
relative to
understand.
that.
And for a normal development, that's reasonable. For this, I think there's a lot of people that may think if they're in the town, they're impacted regardless of distance. So just something to consider.
Do you, I'd be remiss in not asking, do any of those, I think there were 3 different advisements you made there. Do any of those again rise to a level of an action item, if only a note going forward to council that planning commission?
That one I would put as a note, just to consider that as a general town notification. in the
Carolyn, would
mailing.
that be, staff, is that satisfactory? I think we'd be remiss
Absolutely.
in not honoring the,
Absolutely. Yeah, so your motion for approval could be to approve it. Subject to
That was a magic trick.
That was pretty good.
to be a motion to approve it with a recommendation that notice be provided to all residents within the town.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Commissioners, who gets to it, will you support that?
I have a question for you, Carolyn. So, but-
Excuse me, one sec. Either of the other two, though,
No.
I didn't think rose to that level,
no,
though, but that's a good idea. Thank you, Carolyn. Wendy?
this is for you, Carolyn. So we're proposing that the entire town be notified if it's an oil and gas development, right? That's what we're thinking? Is that what I'm hearing?
It'll be going forward to council as a recommendation.
recommendation,
that
okay.
Like everything can accept it.
Okay, so, but would an oil and gas company ever find that unfair? Why do we have to be?
I'm sure they won't like it, absolutely. I don't think it rises to a due process violation problem. It's just, it's providing the notice, so there could be a little more cost for mailing. I'm sure they won't be thrilled about having a different standard, but
Right.
oil and gas has other additional standards, like putting in the recommendation for a neighborhood meeting for this site-specific plan.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have something else, Jim?
Yes. So page 24, 12.7.6. God, my writing, or C, sorry, my writing isn't very good. There was some language in there about, proximity to drinking water and things like that, which is a good thing. I was just curious of, we call out the drinking water, but we don't call out like recreational water, so if, like the reservoir or things like that. I was just curious of why we call out drinking water, not like recreational or irrigation water as well.
I think the inclusion of drinking water, if I think with impacts, if there were leaks, or we would want to mitigate that as much as possible. We can certainly look at reservoirs and irrigation ditches. And we can see if our neighbors have included those in their regs.
Yeah, it's something to look at, not some condition or anything, I
Okay.
just found it curious.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay. Then the last thing was page 26, 12.7.2. But it had it in there, but there was 2 or 3 other spots that has it in there as the community development director is able to approve waivers under specific conditions. And again, given sensitivities and things like that, shouldn't all of these be kind of, public notice, public conversation out in the open with a council decision?
So the waiver process is specific to informed consent of the people who live in proximity to the production site. So we wanted to keep it administrative. Larimer County does have an alternative compliance process, and that would go to their Board of County Commissioners, where if an operator wanted a reduced setback, they would bring studies to the Board of County Commissioners to show that that reduced setback wouldn't have additional harmful impacts, more so than the standard setback. So, I mean, we could include the additional process. During the council discussion, they didn't want it to be too administratively burdensome. And so we first wanted to start with just the waiver process.
But I guess I may be underestimating this, but I wouldn't think we'd have too many, right?
Correct.
If this was waivers on some, site plan or something like that. We know there's going to be several, and those come up frequently, but I wouldn't think that this would come up very frequently at all, especially, a waiver.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, I don't think
Mhm.
this would be,
Yeah. So that's why under that assumption, I was like, well, it seems like we would want, just out of the abundance of caution and sensitivities, that we would not want that.
I'd certainly, if I can chime in, and then Scott, I know you're getting ready to say it too. I did hear at the council meeting, I did hear them say in general, they would not want any of any of this to be unnecessarily burdensome. But this, to me, I'm glad you parsed those details. I would think, given councils also have said equally weighted about transparency and involving the public, I would think we would also be doing our due diligence to add this as a recommendation. If you think it rises to that level, and I think you do, going forward to council, that we did raise that issue. And ultimately, if they decide that it is not in necessary interests of transparency, then they can ignore that recommendation.
Yeah, it's one of those too that, looking at human nature, right? The elected officials are the ones that are going to be accountable for decisions the town makes.
So I guess I'll just give you my philosophy on whenever there's a provision that says the director may, which would be me in this case. In my former position, our code had a lot, not a lot, but they had several provisions where the director had the ability to do an administrative decision. Keyword is may, and the other thing I want to point out, without getting too deep into, myself and Logan are both AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners. There's a code of ethics. And so if there was any case that came before us that felt a little bit, trying to avoid public process, we're not aware of, trying to streamline to make sure it's achieving the goals of not the community, that's something that's pretty well written in our code of ethics. And I can tell you that there would be very few exceptions that I would agree to this condition or any other conditions, especially given the sensitivity around oil and gas, that it would have to be a pretty extraordinary circumstance that I would see that this would be an acceptable, exception to that rule. And that's generally how we would look at any of those instances where there's an administrative review. And, oftentimes if you're hearing neighborhoods complain in public, that's like an immediate red flag, like, nope, this needs to go on. It needs to go through the full process. And I just want to make that very clear. That's how I practice. And it's very clear with my code of ethics in that.
Yeah, and don't take what I'm saying as implying anything. It's just, we've seen over and over that, people quibble over details and, they get excited about, taking a half inch off of this, landscape border and things like that. Where this is like a really major thing.
so I want to make sure I understand. So if there was a proposal for a reduced setback and they got informed consent from all residents and tenants within that setback, you're saying that you still think it should go to town council for their approval for that reduction?
I'm not sure that's what you're saying. I think you're
Oh,
saying that it's the waiver,
Yeah.
not letting it get, but I'm gonna.
Well, no, I am saying that.
Okay.
I am saying that it's like, if nothing more, everybody hears that everybody approved this, 100% of the people approved this. Because people, with that lack of knowledge, they're going to fill in the gaps, rarely with positive things, right? So at least it's out there that, all of these people approved and they're okay with it. And it's public at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm gonna put you on this. Do you, hearing what Scott mentioned, hearing what Logan mentioned, do you want to have this go forward as a recommendation. And then if you say yes, then I'll see if there's a head nod on support for that.
I think it's worth pointing out. And, if they choose not to, that's fine. It's just.
Commissioners, I mean, again, echoing, no offense, we just, again, hearing so much about transparency and such and believing in it anyway. Commissioners, do you support Marty's contention that at least there be a recommendation that Planning Commission brought this up for their consideration
And which piece?
on the,
Notification.
on the waiver?
Yeah,
on-
the community development director, having some authority to do waivers.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And it's okay to disagree. It's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm just trying to understand, because I heard you want town council to hear that 100% of the people said they're okay with it. Is
No,
that the piece?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting that
Yeah.
it go and kind of be vetted in public. or,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I know. I liked your point about that. Let's have the town know that those people all said, yeah, we're okay with this being beside my apartment complex. Is that what you're?
yeah, because
okay.
otherwise, even though nothing bad went on, the assumption is it was a back room sort of thing instead of, no, it wasn't. Everybody agreed to this.
Well, I would support that too. And again, I believe we heard at the outset of this particular concern, this is very, very, very minimally done anyway. So we may not see it, but at least we've let council and then they can decide. All right, are we clear?
I agree. And
Michael,
I
you-
think getting 100% of owners and tenants, it will be very rare. There's always going to be that one person out of two that are going to say, not in my backyard. So I think if there is 100%, it should be brought forward.
Well, okay, so I want to make sure I think everybody else maybe understand. So I understand you're addressing that, but you're more to the point you're addressing the waiver
Yeah.
that rather than leaving it to discretion, it would go through the process.
Yeah.
So it would be vetted publicly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think we're
Yes.
still good on that in that regard. Okay. All right. Logan, anything else? Okay, I did open and close public comment on this. Did I not? On land use code? Okay. All right. Any commissioners, any other questions, comments? Wendy, I see that finger getting
Yep.
ready to, okay.
So Scott, I just want to thank you for educating us on the code of ethics and whatnot. And I think that was really well done. Thank you. I'm educated on your job.
Well, it's a big burden, to have that decision, and I take it seriously. And I think that's, as much as I appreciate the administrative process and streamlining things, it's a big responsibility to have, and it's something I don't take lightly.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have, are you gonna say what we have in terms of recommendation on two things, or shall I take a crack at it?
You're welcome to
No,
do
no,
it.
you
I
are
was-
so much better at that.
Okay, I was also going to note that, there is, if you look at the table 2.1 on page 15, there's a conditional use review process for any oil and gas development that would go before planning commission and before town council. So it's not, there isn't, even if it's a waiver that everyone approves going from 2,000 to 1,000, it's still going to come before planning commission and town council for a development. So
Good. Well, we've got it covered every which way but Sunday, as they say, where I'm from. Good. Okay, so what we're looking at here, I'll be asking for a motion on staff's land use code amendments with two recommendations going forward to council. The first one is on,
General public, the mailing, the general public notice.
that-
So it's a recommendation to approve with the first recommended change being that notice be provided to all property owners within the town. And the question is, does that also include residents? But it would probably be very hard to identify all the residents in the town. So maybe you're comfortable with just all property owners in the town
Satisfactory.
getting
Okay.
notification.
And the second one is regarding the aforementioned numbers that you cited, that regarding the waiver, that would still go through the formal vetting process.
Yes.
Okay, all right, is that clear? Okay, Carolyn, is that satisfactory? Close, was it
It
even
is somewhat
close?
clear. We will try.
Okay.
I think what you'd like the staff to do is look at those waivers of the community development director and make a determination whether any of them should really be council determinations on waivers.
Right? No, I think it was that there is a recommendation to council from planning commission that regarding that provision, that council can decide, we make a recommendation that it not be subject to the waiver possibility. It goes through the vetting process, and that's a recommendation to them. If they think otherwise, or perhaps as you, I'm sure at that time will point out, it already seems to be covered, then in their ultimate wisdom, they can decide it's somewhat, it's either redundant or just plain, they don't agree.
Okay, we'll restate this motion at the end. Don't worry. Before you have to vote. Just to clarify, what we're talking about is that, are you asking that even if 100% of the residents and property owners within the 2,000 feet agree to only a 1,000 foot setback, that still council would decide whether to allow that setback to be decreased to 1,000 feet?
This is where I yield to my colleague. I thought you took, it's too strong. I thought you were making a suggestion that the waiver aspect be the pertinent.
How about we make
Sticking
it
point.
simple? All waivers go to council for consideration.
And I think the waiver, yeah, that sounds. So the waiver from the 2,000 to the 1,000 foot setback would also go to council and require consent of the property owners.
All right. We can, all right. So that is, where I'm looking for a motion to that effect.
Okay, so it's a motion to recommend approval of the land use code changes in amendment number 16 with two modifications. One would be that for oil and gas, notice be provided to all of the property owners within the town, in addition to the property owners and residents within the 2,000 feet. And two, that all waivers be reviewed by waivers of the buffer setback distance be reviewed by town council.
Yes.
Good? Is that good? Okay, meet your considerably
Yeah.
high standards. Okay. All right. With that, do I have a motion to that effect?
Second.
And I was motion been made and we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the amended, we didn't really amend it. The motion carries on a 5-0 vote with the recommendations as noted by the town attorney so ably. Thank you. Very good. Reports. Commissioners, anything to report? Staff, anything to add? Nothing? Okay, very good. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you, staff. Thank you. You